Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I'm Bill Oram, joined, as always, by Brenna Greene from Coin 6. Brenna, you were just telling me off air that you are a little tired this morning, a little bit fatigued. What have you been doing that made you so tired?
This is why I don't let myself watch things on streaming services.
Uh-oh.
I have a propensity to, this is all things in life for me, truly, but, it really gets highlighted when it comes to this. When I start something, I must finish it. Like, I can't do like this, we watched a few episodes, gotta go away for a little while, if it's something that's within reason to be finished that night. And sometimes it's not within reason and you still do it anyways. So yeah, I stayed up till 4 a.m. a few nights ago watching the Court of Gold doc. And let me tell you, it was fantastic. It was great. I loved it. Obviously. Whoopsies.
I'd hate for you to stay up until 4 a.m. and then conclude, it wasn't that good.
Wasn't that good? No, it was really good. It was really great. The access they got was insane.
Yeah.
So if you haven't watched it, and you're listening to this podcast, I would assume you're a sports fan. I would assume you're probably a basketball fan. I would very much recommend it. And, the thing that there's a lot of like niche things that spoke to me. Like, here's the Gonzaga reference. Drink. Kelly Olynyk is featured prominently in it from Team Canada. And that is somebody who I not only, is a Gonzaga player, but I went to school with. In fact, I don't know if I've told this story on this pod or not, but I really went through it my freshman year after drinking out of a cup of someone else who had tonsillitis. And I got tonsillitis a bunch my freshman year of college. It was not fun. And Kelly and I had a class together, and long story short, he found out about it. So then, my freshman year, I'm in one of the dorms, and from the entirety all the way down the hallway, he yells, You Tonsilitis Girl! Have you gotten it again? Absolutely mortifying.
Okay.
So, but we became friends after that. So that was cool to see Kelly so heavily featured. And then, but if you're a Blazers fan or a Ducks fan, I would say that it is also worth watching because it's kind of like there's something about it that's very like final to Nick Batum's career. Obviously, he's still in the NBA, but
right.
We know it's coming to an end sooner rather than later. And this really felt like kind of the crescendo of the career for him. He is heavily featured, and it really brought me back to the first time he came into a Blazers game. I believe it was a preseason game that I was watching, and how he just lit it up. And just being like, whoa, there's something special there, even at the young age I was at. And it really brought me back to that moment, and just kind of seeing his kind of career arc in that way, I thought was truly fascinating. Also, Dylan Brooks heavily featured as well. So that's, interesting to watch, I think, if you're a Ducks fan, to kind of see the dichotomy of him, of who he is off the court and who he is on the court, because it's pretty Jekyll and Hyde. So, anyways, I enjoyed it. Thumbs up. Incredible access, like I said. And I thought it was also really interesting because, obviously we all know the history. Like, if you're a sports fan, you know the history of Team USA and how they used to have kids in college and then they had to switch it up and all that stuff. But it was really interesting kind of learning about the history of other teams as well. Because, you tangentially know some things, but it was really fascinating to kind of get like the history of Team Serbia and what it used to be when it was Yugoslavia and that sort of thing. So, yeah. 5 stars, 2 thumbs up. There's my Court of Gold doc rant that featured me talking about how I got called Tonsillitis Girl by Kelly Olynyk. So there you go. Didn't know
that was worth it on its own.
That was worth it on its own.
Now, whenever I see Kelly Olynyk, I can just say, "You remember Tonsillitis Girl?"
He would probably know who you're talking about.
I think he would. I mean, like, that seems like a pretty memorable.
Yeah. Yelled it in the all boys dorm too. I felt really cool.
All right, so Brenna, we have a basketball heavy episode today.
Yes.
Understandably, it's the middle of February. Like, what else would we be talking about? Although I would say we got the Timbers opener coming up on Sunday against Vancouver.
Yep.
Do-over after getting smoked 5-0 in the playoffs last year. The final appearance of Evander. Bye-bye, Evander. Have fun in Cincinnati. We can talk about that in a few minutes as well. But I want to start with the big news.
It is rather large.
56.2% bigger news, which is the new video screen, Jumbotron video setup in the Moda Center coming in for next season. This is something I've been talking about, something the Blazers have been talking about, kind of part of this gradual renovation, reimagining of Moda Center. Gone are the hustle board and what used to be called the sizzle fizzle board. It's something else now. But those will leave next year, and you're going to have, state of the art, screens in kind of the end zones. There will be like under side monitors, so fans sitting courtside you can actually see a screen. There's a lot of cool things about what they're doing. But I have thoughts, but I'm just curious what your reaction was when you saw that this was happening for next season and when you saw the renderings of what it's going to look
like. My first thought was, great, can we burn the hustle board? But then I thought, no, that needs to be like framed and put in a museum. Because but that thing is just, it's a welcome to 1995 in there with that thing.
Totally. But people love it. But that's part of my thoughts. Keep going.
Yeah. I think that screen that's going to be in the, curvature of the stadium, I think is much needed. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, totally.
That's honestly might be a bigger headline for me than the new Jumbotron, because it's it's making this stadium look like it is an actual stadium in 2025. Yeah, I mean, definitely happy that they are getting a brand new Jumbotron. There is no doubt that the old one looks archaic, and it is just it's been time for about 10 years, I'd say. So
yes,
I'm just happy that at least that part of the renovation is moving forward. It is probably the thing that's the most easy to please people with, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, that is a situation where it's just like, okay, like, this is, I mean, it's not an easy fix. That's a lot of money, but, you're going to get, it's a good way to get good reviews as quickly as possible. So, what are your thoughts on it?
So, I think it looks good. I think the end zone thing, I think, is especially a huge upgrade. So I've been talking to the Blazers, I've been thinking first wrote about like Moda Center renovations in like 2022, like when I first got here. Like, this is something they've been talking about, and there've been, different sort of thoughts, and it seems like they are finally really gearing up on this. Like, they've been talking about this plan of doing, 2-stage renovations, like major renovations before the 2030 women's Final Four is at the Rose Garden Moda Center. That was part of the pitch, was that it was going to be a newly renovated arena when the Final Four comes. So they're going to do this, and I'm glad that this is kind of the first step. But I don't know if it's because I have built it up in my own mind a little bit. But like, I'll be honest, when I saw the renderings, I was a little underwhelmed.
I can understand that.
not because there's anything wrong with it. Like it looks good. Like it absolutely looks good. But I think like when it comes to something like we are bringing our arena into the 21st century, I kind of want to be blown away. And I wasn't blown away. And that just maybe isn't a fair expectation or standard. And this gets into a whole lot of other things too that I think are kind of interesting and worth discussing.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, Intuit Dome just opened in LA, in Inglewood for the Clippers. And Steve Ballmer made it the most technologically, you know, bells and whistles, everything arena possible, right? Like, I mean, there's 3D, it's all, you know, blah, blah, blah. You're part of the video experience just by being there. Like, your seat is a video screen, like, I think. Like, I don't know that, like, Portland needs something like that. Like, it doesn't need to be a ride at Disneyland. And culturally, that doesn't fit Portland anyway. And it's so funny because, like, you know, I saw people online who were like, great, just what we need, a bigger screen to take our attention away from the game on the floor. Or, you know, the people in Portland who are like, you do not mess with the hustle board. And it's like,
oh my God.
And I get that the hustle board is retro and retro is cool. And I would have no problem with the hustle board like being on the concourse or something.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's
something
a great
people
idea.
could visit or something like that.
Make it like an installation.
Right. And I said on Blue Sky yesterday that you know, you want to make millions of dollars or hundreds of dollars, have a hustle board t-shirt and like sell it, like and you know, like Blazers fans, like what an ironic, like, I mean, that's the sort of thing like a really hardcore Blazers fan would get tattooed on their arm, like a hustle board tattoo. So I think like, yes, as a retro thing, hustle board, I get it. But I guess like, you know, I covered like the Utah Jazz in 2013 when they replaced their Jumbotron. And they got like these huge video screens. So it's like it was not even a Jumbotron. It was just 4 screens that like basically were the size of the court. So like it ran the length of the court and then the width of the court, and you know, and like it made a cube. And it felt new, it felt cool, it felt like something just, you know, that they hadn't had before in that market. And I guess what the Blazers have done just feels sort of like an incremental upgrade to what they already have, especially over the center of the court. And I guess like to me, I just sort of wanted to be like, I wanted to see like, wow, this is totally innovative and I didn't expect that. And I think the other thing is like, these feel like upgrades they could have done 5 years ago, or like you said, 10 years ago. So it gets them up to speed with like what an NBA arena looks like in 2025. But like, is this what about what an NBA arena is going to look like in 2030 or 2035? And so this feels a little more like keeping up with the Joneses as opposed to setting a new standard. So, and I guess like what I would then go on to say here is it does make me sort of like wonder, well, what should my expectations be for the rest of the renovation? Like, you know, I don't want to extrapolate too much out of this one thing, but like this is where my mind goes. So disclaimer, like I just have these are like random thoughts, but like if I was underwhelmed by this first visible like sort of rollout of the renovation plans, should I temper my expectations for the whole renovation? Like, is the renovation going to be more of a sort of like, you know, is it not going to be a total reimagining? Is it going to be more of a sort of like, you know, getting up to speed? And should I not have super high expectations for what the rehab of the building is ultimately going to look like? And I don't know. I mean, like, and I don't think the Blazers know exactly what they're going to do yet either. And I would note because they just sent out a survey to fans like 2 weeks ago, you know, asking for feedback on the renovation. I think that they are kind of in that stage where like they have plans, but they are also still crowdsourcing and figuring out what is possible and what they're going to do. So I think this is very much an ongoing conversation. And the feedback from places like the Oregonian Sports Podcast has the potential to make a difference.
I mean, obviously, the Blazers brass are listening to this podcast with a fine-tooth comb. Brenna and Bill are the authorities on all things PDX sports, and that is what matters. So,
including architecture and design.
Yes. Very much so. No, I understand what you're saying with the video board for sure. I thought to myself, I wish it was a little differently shaped, if that makes sense. Not a huge fan of like the square shape of it right now that I'm seeing. So I understand what you are saying for sure, that it just kind of felt like, okay, they're upgrading it. Like it wasn't like some like oh, that looks so cool design. It was just like, okay, there you have a new video board.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would agree with you that yeah, you wonder, okay, so what is this really going to look like? What are these changes going to be? Because if this looks essentially the same as the last video board, just bigger and higher quality, does that mean that everything else on the inside is going to look the same?
Right.
Which leads me to my next question for you, because I have a few thoughts on this.
Okay.
Things that you would like to see changed in the renovation in the Moda Center.
Yeah, so
Please
we're
go.
looking ahead 5 years, basically. Like when I walk into the Moda Center for the 2030 Women's Final Four, what building are we in?
Yes.
You know, I'm sure there are lots of sort of behind the scenes things that need to be upgraded, like that aren't for the average fan. Like, you know, the luxury lounge downstairs, like that's on like the event level is a little bit antiquated. Like, you know, fans who are in there are not like getting like a super like luxe experience like from there to their seat. Like it's like there's things that you want to that they'll want to upgrade to kind of enhance that experience. But like when we talk about like older arenas that have been renovated, some of the very best examples are Utah. The Delta Center is contemporary to the Moda Center Rose Garden. I think it was built a little earlier. I think Utah maybe built theirs in 91. And which is also, it's really interesting because it's built specifically for basketball, and then they get an NHL team and had to sort of like make adjustments to accommodate a hockey team because that arena was not built for hockey.
Yeah.
But and Phoenix. Have you been to Phoenix since they've redone it?
I have not. I have never been inside Phoenix's arena. I've been outside, but not inside.
So the thing that like I love most about what they did in Phoenix is when you walk in the main entrances of is it Talking Stick Resort Arena now?
I think that's right.
But used to be America West Airlines Arena. Now they basically blew out a section of seats or two sections of seats. I'm not entirely sure, but created like an open mezzanine level on the concourse where you walk in and you have a view of the court and the entire inside of the arena. So it ties the concourse into the arena, and there's a big bar space, you know, in the center, so fans can come in, they can order a beverage, and never take their eyes off the court. And like I think that sort of integrated experience is becoming more the norm. Like Sacramento has that, where like the concourse is open to the court, so you're walking around and like you're not actually feeling like you're in a completely different place than the game. Like Moda right now, you know, the arena itself is like a concrete bunker, and then you're in like a hall. You don't feel like you're part of the if you are out of your seat and going to the restroom, going to go buy a jersey, like you are disconnected from what's happening in the arena. And I think finding a way to integrate those two things, you know, is paramount, because I think that just changes the experience completely. That's probably number one on my list, to be honest. How about you?
Yeah, the first thing that jumps out to me is that concourse has got to have serious upgrades. It's just like it's a concrete jungle in the concourse. And it's just so like sterile and characterless. And you're walking through a concrete jungle that has a bunch of food pop-ups in it. There's nothing that makes it. The only thing that is consistent about that concourse is that it's just all concrete. That's the only thing that like ties it all together. And that's not a good thing to really have everything be tied together. It's just not, it's not open. It's not not light. It's very kind of like dark when you're in there because of all the concrete.
It's difficult to navigate when it's full of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, that's very true. It's just not. Like I said, it's just very sterile. It's not like it's not an environment that encourages excitement.
Well, and like there's not a lot of places to hang. Like, and I think that, pregame, halftime, I think creating spaces where fans can, lounge a little bit, like hang out. I know there's one, I think, but like, it just doesn't have that sort of, it's not that welcoming sort of environment. Like, I think mostly you want to get, to and from your seat. And like, I know there's gonna be people listening who, are like, we're there to watch the game. Like, why do we need blah, 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 blah. But like, it's all about fan experience and giving fans like a, more things to appreciate and enjoy about being there. Because really, I mean, honestly, if you only care about watching the game, for most people, the viewing of the game experience is going to be better on TV than being there from most seats in any arena. It just is.
Yep.
But what sets apart like live sports is the communal aspect of it, the being with people, getting to, create those core memories of eating, cotton candy or, hey, beer guy. This is something I realized recently. What happened to the beer guy? There's nobody coming through the stands anymore. Like ice cold beer with like pints of Coors Light sloshing around. Like that doesn't exist anymore. Like when did we lose that as a society? Like it used to be here and now it's not. I don't know when that happened.
I'm so sorry that has happened to you.
But you know what? It's like such a fundamental, visage of a sporting event. Do they still exist at baseball? They must. I know they still exist at baseball.
I'm sure they still exist in baseball.
Baseball people, check in. Let me know.
Yeah.
So I just think anything that creates like that game day atmosphere, keeping the atmosphere going as long as you can, from from the court to your seat to the concourse to outside the concourse. I mean, obviously they need to figure out what to do with the plaza and how to integrate that and to make it a more inviting place. Obviously, for most of the season, fans are showing up to Moda at 6 and it is already pitch black and dark. But this is Portland. Portland is quirky. What does Portland have? Portland has food carts. Like, could you put in like a permanent food cart pod or something that pays homage to the food carts, integrate that with the arena? Like, how do you make this really, really Portlandy? And like in a good way, by the way. Like, and so I was somebody yesterday who mentioned the airport. Like when you land in Portland now, the airport feels like you are in Oregon.
It's amazing.
And
fantastic job.
What is the arena version of that? Where you make it feel like the Pacific Northwest, you make it feel like Portland, you make it feel like Oregon. And I think that's the challenge. And I think the other point I want to make is I think there's separate questions here. Like, what makes a good arena, a good NBA arena in general, and just sort of in a vacuum? And what makes a good arena for Portland? Because I don't think those are necessarily the same thing. Like I don't think you take Intuit Dome and just drop it in Portland. Like, obviously it'd be awesome, but like, culturally, does it fit as well? Like, what do fans here want and what do fans here appreciate the most? And, like, I mean, again, I go back to the people online who were, kind of griping that the screen's getting too big. Like, I know you don't want to go to a game and only see the screen, but like, I don't feel like once you're actually at a game that has a huge screen, I've never been somewhere where I felt like the screen was like detracted from my experience.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but then there's just the people who are always like, the building's fine. There's nothing wrong with Moda Center at all anyway. And so why are we even having this conversation? And the talking point that the Blazers like to use when talking about this, and I think it's important and I think it's helpful, Moda Center is the oldest non-renovated building in the NBA.
Yep.
It's never had a major renovation, and it's 30 years old.
Yeah. Can I put one more like behind the scenes thing on your periphery of things that need to be renovated?
They need an actual interview room for their press conferences.
That would, you know what? That had not occurred to me, but I think that's a great idea, Bill. He's like, yeah. How about this one? How about this one for you? And I think that you will. I think I'm going to say this, and you're going to be like, yes. You want to know how to build some goodwill around the rest of the NBA? Maybe renovate the worst visitors' locker room in the entire league. It is so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Those locker rooms generally, those smaller locker rooms that are not the Blazers locker rooms, they all need a ginormous upgrade.
Yeah.
And it is embarrassing to walk into that visitor's locker room and see how bad it is. It's not good. I mean, it's for those of you who have not been in there, it is cramped. It's claustrophobic in there when you have an NBA team in there, because there are so many, there's players, but there's also these coaching staffs that have 20 people on them.
And they've gotten a lot bigger, right? Like traveling parties have grown exponentially since, like when the building was constructed, teams were more or less still in the age of like, you had 12 players, 4 coaches, and a trainer, and that was more or less kind of what your traveling party was.
But
now
generally,
it's 30, 40 people.
When you ask players in the league, and I saw this last week, when you ask players in the league, what's the worst visiting stadium to go to, inevitably Moda comes up because of that locker room and how bad it is.
And I've been, so I covered the NBA for 10 years. I know I mentioned this a lot, but like I've seen arenas come and go, right?
Yep.
Like I covered games at the Palace. I covered games at Arco, and like, yes, like old arenas had small, like problematic, like visitors locker rooms, and new ones have locker rooms that are big enough to actually accommodate a professional basketball team, because like you're saying, the number of people has grown, the amount of stuff teams bring with them, in terms of like, the exercise equipment, and like, I don't want to be like foam rollers, but like the modalities and like all the things that like they do now has increased. And also it's like, there was, in the old days, there was a little bit of there was like a point of pride almost a little bit in like making the visiting team uncomfortable. Like Detroit famously, during the finals, the Lakers Pistons finals, like, they turned off the hot water in the showers, and, the food was spoiled, or the popcorn was stale. Like, but like, players from that team tell stories about like how like they went out of the way to make the experience in the visitors locker room, more unpleasant. That's not really part of professional sports anymore, like in this hampered age. So yes, I think that that's something that fans don't see, but yes, would need to be improved. The other thing is, the Blazers have talked about obviously wanting to have an all-star game. Portland's one of the few NBA markets that has never hosted an all-star game. And the league has done a great job of trying to kind of make up for that with the cities they've been rewarding. I mean, yes, next year's in LA, this year was in San Francisco, but they've gone to Charlotte, they've gone to Indy, they've gone to Salt Lake. Like, they are going to smaller
Toronto
markets
a few years ago.
Toronto was fabulous. It was so cold, but it was fabulous. And the knock on Portland was always, there aren't enough hotels. Well, that's not a problem anymore. Like, you've got the Ritz now. Like, there are enough hotels. The problem with Portland now is the arena.
Yeah.
And the problem with the arena is that there's not enough space for all the things that an all-star game requires, in just terms of the inner working and like the amount of equipment and the areas that things are set up, different interview areas, the props. I mean, there's just so much that goes into an event like an all-star game. There's not enough usable space underneath Moda Center for an event of that scale. Or it is really, really, really tight if they did.
Yes.
And so I think expanding the usable space, and this is like really inside baseball, but is the sort of thing that's holding Portland back as a sports town.
I think this is valid.
That, it needs to increase that footprint. So, and they have the space to do it, obviously, because, the entire complex, is sort of your oyster at this point. I mean, you can push out into the plaza, you can push out, into existing parking, whatever it ends up looking like. But I mean, I think expanding the space for larger scale events.
Two things I want to say. If you think that the concourse is a concrete jungle, go into the bowels of Moda. It's even worse. It's just characterless.
Well, and like I would say just, the real, like the lower hallways of like most arenas are, right?
Yes, they are.
It's a bunker. It's a concrete bunker, a new arena
Yes.
or an old arena.
Yes.
Like that's about functionality.
Yeah.
And so there is a balance there, but like from a functional standpoint, even like Moda falls short. But continue.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. There's just so many like, and I don't know what you do about this structurally, but what I was kind of getting at is the fact that there's just, it's so like kind of all segmented off, and there's so many like concrete poles and things like that just, from your perspective in terms of functionality and being able to move around, make things way more difficult. Another thing that I do want to say about the visiting locker room thing, what has been one of the problems in this Blazers franchise historically that could be, it's not correlated with the visiting locker room, but I'm going to get there.
Injured big men.
Yeah, well, that's one of them. That has nothing to do with that. It's getting free agents.
Mm-hmm.
You want to know a way that could really help? Make that visiting locker room really good. Make it a situation that impresses players so that they have a much better feeling when it comes to Portland when they're thinking about signing. I don't know if it makes a huge difference or not, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
Well, I think it's an interesting point. I like it because if the feeling that a player has about Portland, obviously they're going to think, the weather. They're going to think,
yes.
small market. But it's like, man, it's like when I go to that building, I mean, they've got like, they take care of us. Like that franchise, like if they take that good care of us as visitors, imagine what they do like if you're actually on the team, that sort of thing. Like I think that goodwill across the NBA is not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Or make them so comfortable that they are like they can't play hard and physical because they've been, enjoying their free pedicure that the Blazers offer all visiting players. And they run out on the court and they're just too relaxed.
I love it. This is great reverse psychology.
And to my point about space, like I feel like maybe people are tuning this out because it's not that interesting. But like,
yes,
it's like, let me just paint this picture. To get from the Blazers locker room to the visiting locker room, there is a corridor that is a perfectly normal sized hallway. People can walk down it. It's not like it's super narrow. The problem is that to then go past the visitors' locker room to the court, the visiting teams don't have the space to have their training table, to have players stretch, to do the massages, like all these things that happen. So all of that now has moved out into the hallway.
Yeah.
So for anybody, whether it's a member of the media, whether it's, players going to and from the court, coaches, whoever needs to move in this building, you are almost physically crawling over NBA players who are just trying to stretch to get ready for the game. And it's like, it's a thoroughfare. And it's like, that needs to not be in the middle of the hallway because I mean, from the league standpoint, like I've never heard of like, a media member accidentally stepping on an NBA player. Like, but like there is a safety factor there. And like where players are not being put in the safest environment. And so that's the sort of thing that needs to be addressed. Like the Blazers and the NBA have just outgrown what Moda currently looks like.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's hardly enough room in that visiting locker room for catering. So, that says it all. Like so we obviously both have a lot of opinions on this. And I think we've somehow managed to go on for 35 minutes about renovations. But
I also think it's exciting. Like I agree. I think it's
the world is your oyster.
Well, yeah, and there's like kind of a blank canvas element to it. Which again I think is why like I was a little bit like kind of like underwhelmed by the the video upgrades, because it's like, okay, if you have a totally blank canvas, like what you did doesn't seem that different from what you previously had.
Yeah, not that revolutionary.
And then I'm just kind of like, obviously there's the functionality, obviously there's the fan experience, but like, I don't know, like, what's the signature of this arena going to be? Like,
Yes.
is there like something that people will like identify with, recognize it for?
Yes.
Is there going to be and like, then this leads to my other series of questions, which is about, honoring the history of the team. Is it could whatever you do include, statues of Blazers legends? Like, I think that is something that should be done. I think Bill Walton should have a statue. I think Bill Schonely should have a statue. I think Clyde Drexler should have a statue. And eventually Damian Lillard will have a statue. But like, to me, that's sort of obvious. And like, talk about building goodwill with fans, like including that in the plans, I think would be meaningful. But that does bleed into the next thing I wanted to talk to you about. And I didn't even tell you we were going to do this. So This is exciting. But this came up this week because Buck Williams, my favorite Blazer of all time, my childhood hero.
Okay.
Number 52, the bespectacled Buck, if you will.
Okay.
Is a finalist for the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Buck Williams spent the first 9 years of his career in Brooklyn. Gets traded to Portland. The Blazers immediately have the best 3-year run of success in the franchise's history, go to 2 finals. And Buck Williams is now potentially going to join Clyde Drexler in the Hall of Fame. Buck Williams' number is not retired in Portland. Clyde's number is retired. Terry Porter's number is retired. The Blazers have retired 10 players' jerseys. I think there are 4 players who need to have their number retired by the Blazers. And I think there is a real reluctance by the Blazers, by leadership, to retire numbers.
Yes.
Because they have been criticized historically for retiring too many numbers. And so I think they really want to avoid like overdoing it. But I think in the process, they have sort of missed some obvious ones.
Yep.
And did I say 4? I think there's 5. I think there's 5 players who need to have their numbers retired by the Blazers.
Okay.
In order from most obvious to least obvious, Damian Lillard, I think Brandon Roy should be a no question.
I agree with you.
Number retired.
I agree with you.
And I recognize that his career was cut short, that he, ended up not playing as many years, blah, 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 blah. 1, it doesn't matter. 2, there's precedent as an organization that stumbled upon this again the other day. Lloyd Neal is the player that Blazers fans are kind of like, oh, should Lloyd Neal's number have been retired? Part of the reason that his number was retired was because his career was cut short by knee injuries. And it was an appreciation of the fact that he still had more to give, but his body gave out. And he was nowhere near the player that Brandon Roy was in terms of like what he meant to any one team. Lloyd Neal was a terrific player, but like Brandon Roy was a multi-time All-Star, one of the best players in the league. And then, injuries hit him. I just don't think it's a question. I think like if you get into the weeds on, well, he didn't play this many years, blah, 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 blah. I think you're missing the point of Brandon Roy. He was one of the best players in the league on one of the most young and exciting teams in the league that was coming out of a really dark period. He helped usher the Blazers out of the so-called jail Blazers era. I just don't even think there's a debate. And here's something else I'll say too. Blazer fans were able to move on from Brandon Roy really quickly because Dame showed up immediately, like the next year. And so the heartache of Brandon's career ending, while that still exists, I think was made easier by the fact that you had a new young star. And so like Damian Lillard, the Blazers haven't found the replacement for Dame. So even though Dame's been in Milwaukee the last 2 years, I think most Blazer fans would still tell you he's their favorite player. And so Damian Lillard has carved out an even larger footprint than Brandon Roy because not only did he play here for 10 years, but he hasn't been replaced yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like his legacy is still ongoing in Portland, whereas Brandon's like ended, and then it really ended because he was replaced by Dame. So just sort of a caveat. So those are the first two. LaMarcus will have his number retired, no question. And then I think
I'm
Jerome
a little bit more
Kersey,
iffy on that one, but all right.
The numbers just are there, and he was a multi-time All-Star and blah 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 blah. Yes, he left, but the numbers are just there. And then I think Jerome Kersey and Buck Williams are the other two, and I think that those two guys maybe run a little bit more of the risk of overdoing it. They weren't the best player on those finals teams. Buck was never an All-Star in Portland. He was a 3-time All-Star in New Jersey. But Jerome, beloved, and I think that matters. I think the intangible thing of like you were beloved matters. I don't think it's strictly a statistical play. But from a statistical standpoint, when it comes to Buck Williams, my favorite childhood player, who I wrote about earlier this week and I'm going to write about again, so like this is why I'm getting all this off my chest. He had career averages, Brenna, of... Hold on. Sorry, I had it. 12.8 points and 10 rebounds. Not overwhelming, but very, very, very solid. Do you know how many players in the history of the NBA... Hold on, sorry. I'll just cut to the chase.
Okay.
Buck Williams... Sorry. He had 16,784 career points, 13,017 rebounds, and shot a career average from the field of 54.9. How many players in NBA history do you think have those numbers or better? On 3 of the most basic statistical categories that we have in basketball: points, rebounds, field goal percentage.
Go 7.
Okay, good. Totally good guess. It is 3.
Okay.
Kareem, Shaq, Dwight Howard. Now, those guys all have much bigger numbers, but in terms of, what he did,
yeah,
it's there. And like, I'm kind of skeptical that Buck's gonna get in the Hall of Fame, at least this time around. But just because, listen, he was my favorite player as a kid, and I was not ever sitting around thinking that Buck Williams not being in the Hall of Fame was some grave injustice. But, I've looked at it a little bit more this week, and it's like, yeah, there is a really strong case. And he had the individual success as a New Jersey Net. He was Rookie of the Year, 3-time All-Star, had bigger individual numbers, and then he comes to Portland. Individual numbers go down, but goes to 2 finals, misses only 4 games in the 3 best in the best 3-year run the team's ever had. 1990 to 1992, he only missed 4 games. So incredibly durable and consistent. So to me, those 5, however you want to do it, should all be in the rafters at Moda Center. Am I being too liberal with what a retired number can mean, or am I doling these out too liberally, do you think?
I don't have as much point of reference for Jermaine and Buck.
Jerome.
So therefore, that's something that's hard for me to give my opinion on, because I just, like I said, I do not have that historical context as much. I definitely I agree with you on Damon B. Roy. LaMarcus is wonderful, but I think that how he left the franchise is just really hard for me to justify retiring the number. It has a very numbers are great. Numbers are great. But there's also an emotional component to retiring a number. And Damian, in his situation, he's able to overcome that. Because first of all, he's very much on the record on how much he loves this town. He loves this city. But also, he did a really good job while he was here of connecting with the city. And so therefore you can kind of get over it because everything that happened was ultimately understandable with what went down in that situation. LaMarcus, I never felt like was super connected with this city.
Mhm.
He was a very good player who played here. He is not someone that I think of as an all-time trailblazer in my mind. And especially with just how he kind of just was like, all right, I'm out. And I understand what you're saying, but the jersey retirement has much more, there, like I said, there's an emotional component to it as well, and a connection to the franchise in the city. And even if Damian is not a Blazer right now, it still feels like he's connected to that franchise. The moment LaMarcus left, it never felt like he was connected to the franchise again.
Yeah, I get that.
So for me, I'm not as, I that's where I can offer my perspective as LaMarcus, and I just, numbers are great. But when it comes to retiring your jersey, that is not all there's more to it than that. I agree with you about the fact that there are way too many jerseys retired. We have joked about this in the practice facility before, where you've been like, who's that player? And I'd be like, I literally could not tell you.
Well, what's interesting is the I'd have to go back. They have on the practice facility, they have the list of all their Hall of Famers, and there's like an assistant coach who I was not even familiar with, who they list on the wall, and I wish I was looking at it now.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder also how the Blazers are going to, or if the Blazers are going to handle the Carmelo component of it, because Carmelo's going to go in this class, and obviously, his Blazers tenure is essentially an afterthought on a Hall of Fame career, but he played 2 years here. So I think that like they have to add him to that display at the practice facility. And I guess they must have done the same thing with Chauncey, but okay. So interesting.
Yeah.
I would also just say that LaMarcus Aldridge, I hear what you're saying. I also think time heals all wounds. The fact that he was a 4-time All-Star, only Dame and Clyde have gone to more All-Star games as a Blazer. Players leave in free agency. Like, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean I don't have, profound empathy for people who, but I think that if we've learned anything in the 10 years since LaMarcus Aldridge left Portland, it's that what he did was not particularly unique. And if Kevin Durant, like, it's an interesting, here's what's interesting. I know people who think Kevin Durant's number will absolutely not be retired in Oklahoma City. That it's like, won't happen. And if that's true, then I think you have a point. But I just honestly cannot fathom that once all is said and done, that Kevin Durant's number is not going to be retired in Oklahoma City. That blows my mind. Even though, Russell Westbrook, much more loved by fans in Oklahoma City than Kevin Durant still. Although, here's what's interesting. This idea of Oklahoma City being a team that could make a run at KD this summer, because they obviously have the assets to do anything they want. Depending on what happens in the playoffs, if the Thunder do decide to reunite with Kevin Durant, that would be pretty perfect. I don't know if I love it from a long-term runway of the Thunder as contenders for the next 15 years, which they seem positioned to be, but it would be a nice coda to his career to go back and end his career with OKC on a championship caliber team, and probably to heal those wounds.
Yeah. I mean, I think another thing that we just have to think of from a realistic standpoint, and this is something that as you have mentioned, the franchise has kind of pigeonholed themselves with, is you can't retire all the numbers.
No, you can't.
So, and there's a lot of numbers retired right now. So, I think that becomes a situation too where you have to be really judicious about it.
I mean, the Celtics have retired 24 numbers. It's not like the Blazers are going to run out of numbers.
Yeah.
But maybe good ones.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It's like one of those things where it's never going to happen because it's a PR disaster. It's like, can you unretire that number?
You can't. You absolutely can't.
You can't.
Here's the other one that I think is sort of interesting because like I feel like history's been so kind to Rasheed Wallace, and he wore number 30. Obviously, was the best player on one of the best Blazers teams ever. Went to a couple of All-Star games as a Blazer, and he wore number 30, which after Rasheed was done playing was retired for two players who played before Rasheed. I mean, I think you could make an argument that you could add Rasheed to the list of players for whom number 30 is retired, along with Terry and Bobby Gross. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but like he would be my fringy guy. But here's what I think. Here's something that's interesting about the retired numbers that the Blazers have had. The Blazers have existed for 55 years. Okay, 1970. Everybody whose number is retired right now played in the first 25 years of the franchise's history.
Yeah.
And so they've not yet retired a number from the second half of the franchise's history.
That's pretty wild.
And so if there were 10 players whose number should be retired from the first 25 years, and so far zero, well, we are in agreement only that there's one slam dunk. Well, we agree on Brandon, but there is one slam dunk player from the subsequent 30 years who's going to have his number retired, and that's Dame.
Yeah, but we got to wait that one out.
Right. Otherwise, like, B. Roy, obviously, like, they haven't done it yet. And I think that they've gotten kind of hung up in the, was he here long enough kind of question. LaMarcus, honestly, could be any day now, in my opinion. You disagree. And other than that, like, there haven't been players who rise to that level in 30 years. Which is just interesting how badly weighted it is the other way. And I'm making the argument that there's two players who played before 1995 who should have their number retired as well. So that'd bring it to 12-0. So I just find it to be a very interesting question. But I guess we'll see.
Remember how we were going to talk some soccer on this podcast?
We got time.
We've
got time. We got a few minutes.
Oh, what do you want to get into? Let's talk soccer.
Well, I would just like to say that I'm excited to see what the Timbers look like in the post-Evander era. I thought Phil Neville worked magic last year with that team. Evander was
he did a good job.
Unbelievable.
When he wanted to be.
But, I mean, he had an MVP caliber season. He was magic to watch. I'm going to miss watching him play on a regular basis. I also think that that parting of the ways was ultimately necessary. After contract, conversations broke down and it became as public as it was. And now there's reports that it became a toxic situation. So Evander got what he wanted. He got out of Portland. I think Timbers fans lose. That said, I think the Timbers are going to be better. Year 2 of a coach who knows what he's doing. You have pieces. You replace Evander with another, very high thought of, attacking midfielder in DaCosta. I just think that they're going to be great. I mean, not great. I don't mean they're going to be great. They're not going to be. I'm not saying they're going to be a great team. I'm saying they're going to be they're in great shape. Is what I'm trying to say. Because Evander, for as great as he was, and for him I mean great as in great, he's still a really, really good MLS player. Like, he's probably at the highest level he's going to reach in the pro game. Like, he's not going to England. He's not going to France or Spain or Germany. Like, he's not on that level. So, yes, the Timbers have lost a player who was tremendous at this level. But
when
you're talking about soccer and you have the ability to go, like, acquire players from anywhere in the world, is he unreplaceable? I don't think. No, he's not, and it wasn't worth the headache that was coming with it. So, happy trails to Evander. It was fun while it lasted, and onward.
I'm on the record saying I didn't have any problem with what he did. I guess maybe not. I didn't have any problem. But, what happened with the tweets after the game, I was not as upset by them as other people because of the fact that there have been a lot of issues with management and players over there over the last few seasons. I mean, it's well documented. Evander is not the first Timbers player to have a problem. Is he the first Timbers player to address it in the way that he did? Yeah. But, that game was just such a disaster. In some ways, maybe that franchise needed that breakdown to happen. To have somebody say, this is not okay. I'm sure that they would prefer that wouldn't have been public. That makes sense to me. But sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes those sort of situations are what actually propel you forward. So, between the fact that there's been a lot of issues with management and players over there over the last however many years, and the fact that sometimes these things just aren't pretty, I didn't have an issue with it. That does not mean that I thought that there was a world in which Evander could come back and play for this team and everything would be hunky dory. So,
yeah, I think the Timbers are better off.
Yeah, I think so too.
In totality, I think they're better off.
I think so too. As I've said multiple times in this conversation, you never knew what Evander you were getting every night.
Well, and also, my goodness. Granted, I recognize that, he moved to a new country, new city, new club, new system. That's a lot. His first year here,
very meh.
And he was not pleasurable to watch play soccer.
No,
and he was kind of a jerk, frankly.
Yeah,
he was getting, not to me, not the media. I'm not saying he was not friendly, but on the field, he was a jerk. He was getting, getting popped for unnecessary fouls, penalties, red cards in critical situations. Kind of acted like he didn't want to be there. Maybe that explains it was explained by some of the issues he was having over, visa issues for family members and all of that. But, for as great as his second season here was, his first season was just as not. So, who knows what year 3 might have looked like. Obviously if they'd been able to work out an extension and he was happy financially and his family was here, it would have been probably a pretty, palatable situation for him. But, like you said, these things often aren't pretty. It happens, but by no means do I think Evander is an irreplaceable global talent.
Yeah. The other soccer thing that I wanted to discuss with you very quickly was the Thorns getting a new jersey sponsor. And this actually, I think could end up having bigger implications than hey, they have a new jersey sponsor. Because their new jersey sponsor is Ring. All right, cool, great. Glad they have a new jersey sponsor. Do you know the company that owns Ring?
I don't. Tell me.
Amazon.
Oh yeah, okay, sure. Yeah.
So, getting Amazon into the fold before you get this new WNBA team is a very good sign for the Bethals. So, just something that I kind of went, that's interesting. I wonder what this means down the line. So, just kind of piqued my interest when I saw, Ring owned by Amazon. I was like,
just what we need is more Bezos.
I mean, Sorry. That's all we need in this world. But I'm very curious to see if there's something that ends up happening down the line with Amazon and this new WNBA team, especially since, as you mentioned, Jeff Bezos is well known to be one of the people betting on the Celtics. So he is absolutely interested in the sport of basketball,
Mm-hmm.
right meow.
Yeah, I wonder if it would be interesting if we had a basketball team that was for sale in Portland.
What's that? Oh, we're
The
just gonna keep waiting
Chinooks
on
of the
that.
old
It's gonna be,
CBA.
for people who are upset about that, I get it. It's gonna be a bit before that thing
Yeah.
actually goes on the market.
Yeah, hang
So
on.
yeah.
By the way, did you see the mayor of Seattle pull a fast one in his
I
press conference the other
did.
day?
What was that?
I thought it was funny. I thought it was hilarious.
Oh, nope. I
I
get
thought it was really
why
funny.
you would think it was funny. I think as somebody looking at it through the lens of a scarred Sonics fan, oh my God. I would not. I
mean,
think that was funny. I would think that was really a sick and twisted joke.
so if you didn't see it, and we're gonna get out of here, but if you didn't
Yeah.
see it, the mayor of Seattle was like in the middle of his State of the City speech, and he says, "I have an announcement to make," and he pulls a basketball out from behind the podium, and you hear like loud gasps, like. First of all, if Seattle was getting an NBA team, the announcement would not come in the middle of a speech featuring only the mayor. Okay, that's the first thing.
Yes.
But second of all, like, I thought it was funny. I like a good joke, and also Seattle's getting an NBA team. Like, it is pretty well understood this is going to happen.
Yeah.
If there is NBA expansion, which there is going to be, because NBA owners like money, it just seems it is a done deal that Seattle will be one of the two cities that's part of it. So yes, while the actual announcement is who knows when that's coming and highly anticipated, like the question of whether Seattle's going to get an NBA team again seems to be pretty well settled.
Off topic, but a random rant. The amount of times I saw at All-Star Weekend players getting asked, where do you think the next NBA team should be? Everybody knows that it's Seattle and Las Vegas. Stop asking that question. And if you must ask that question, put the caveat in that Seattle and Vegas don't count, because we all know what's happening. Okay? Like, you're right. It's a done deal, and it would have been a very weird environment. However, when you're in that moment and you're just listening to someone and your brain is kind of turned off listening to another person, all of a sudden you're like, well, is this possible? Because you're not thinking, you don't have the time to think rationally and think things through. So I don't think anybody in that room had the time to be like, oh, this definitely isn't happening here. That would be really weird, because all of a sudden he just pulled out a basketball and everybody was, shock and awe. So,
how about, by the way, speaking of like basketball teams, like an expansion, how about Cleveland like coming out of nowhere to get a WNBA team, like, and bring back the Rockers? I did not see that coming at all when we're talking about like, additional teams in this WNBA expansion cycle. But like Cleveland was not on my radar at all for teams that were going to come back.
No.
So
double
that's
the
cool.
expansion fee that the Bethals paid. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
And
$250 million.
Yeah. $250 million. And also, another situation that piques my interest a little bit, because, something that is not, I think, talked about is openly, or that is just, not, I shouldn't say it like that. Finding names for a team that works trademark wise is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting that Cleveland just went, yep, we're going to go with the Rockers, because that's what they were, because that's an easy thing for them to do. Makes me very interested to see what's going to happen here. So we'll see. And now the league is going to expand even more, it sounds like. So
I think
it's crazy.
Greene told Front Office Sports that they have run into some issues with trademarking on some of the names that they were interested in. So it would be interesting to see if any roads lead back to,
if they go path of least resistance here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't rule out the Portland Power, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Could
might
be.
rule out the Portland Power.
Yeah. Anyways, I just think it's incredibly stunning that we went from that meeting with Kathy that was here a few years ago. I mean, 2 years ago to
February of 23.
where everything was very iffy and wishy-washy in that conversation, and there was no clear answers, and blah blah blah. And now we've gone to, okay, so now we have let's see, Bay Area, Portland, Cleveland, Toronto, 4 teams coming in, and there's a possibility of 2 more.
Because there's more.
Insane.
I mean, Denver wants a team. Nashville wants a team. Boston wants a team.
And
Charlotte wants a team.
Yeah. And
I mean, Sacramento. There's a movement in Sacramento to bring back the Monarchs.
Yeah. Half of me gets a little like, okay, this might be enough. You might want to just chill out for a second and see how this goes with these 4.
Should there be more WNBA franchises or Blazers retired numbers?
I'm going with more WNBA franchises.
Brenna, we're going to get out of here. We've done it all. We've touched on every possible subject under the sun. And I limited my Buck Williams talk. I didn't get as carried away as you might have expected, given my childhood love of Buck Williams. I did get to talk to him on the phone this week, by the way. That was pretty cool. They say never meet your heroes. Got to meet a hero, at least by phone. Enjoyed it.
Do you want to know I'm going to tell you this anyway, so whatever. My childhood Blazers hero?
Kelly Olynyk. Oh, who?
No.
Wait, hold on. Wait, hold on. Actually, I want to guess. Okay, time out on this podcast ending.
Yes.
How many false starts have I done on ending the podcast over the year plus that we've been doing this? There have been so many times we're getting out of here, and we're not getting out of here. Okay, You are a little bit younger than me. You're like 5 years younger than me, which means that if my heyday was like 92, yours was like the 2000 team. So your favorite players from the 2000 team, I think your childhood hero was Brian Grant.
Oh my gosh, he got it. To the point where
I am Bill Oram for Brenna Greene. Thank you so much for listening to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I will be working other acts of magic on next week's podcast. Tune in to see what we have up our sleeve. Please rate, subscribe, tell your friends, and continue to read the Oregonian Oregon Live and like Brenna on Coin 6. Thanks for listening.